Welcome back. So as the holidays come to an end, many parents are preparing for the approaching school year. Now, the early childhood development sector is raising concern about the level of school readiness of South African children, and to unpack certainly developmental lessons learned in 2024 and what needs to be taken seriously in 2025. We are joined by Professor Eric Atmore, who's the founder of the NGO, the Center for Early Childhood Development. Prof, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. This is such an important discussion, and I think this year is certainly being an important one for education, with that Bella Act being such a contentious issue. But I think I want to start with your thoughts on whether or not ECD got the attention that it needed in 2024.
Now, lady, good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers. No, certainly not. You know, in this country, for ECD, we seem to take one step forward, then two steps back, and one step sideways. So the introduction of grade R as a compulsory year of schooling is a fantastic idea. The only downside is that that was recommended to the incoming government in 1994, and it's taken 30 years to get onto the legislation. So besides grade R, which is a huge victory in getting that additional year to prepare children for formal education, the early childhood sector has been really knocked and hammered by a Department of Basic Education, which has done little to provide more budget for young children and for early childhood development, has done little with regards to the training of teachers, has done little with regards to infrastructure, meaning the buildings in which children attend each day. So we've got a lot to do, and I really just hope that our government and our basic education department would put young children first. That's the most important thing. They're not our future, they are our present and they are our future. And if we don't treat them well now, we're going to end up with the atrocious matric results that we get each year. We're going to end up with children dropping out of high school and being unemployed and unemployable. So it's not a very bright picture.
Yeah, you know, I immediately want to look at what the statistics say around school readiness, right? So when our children do start grade 1, just how many, in your view, really are ready for that level of education? I believe a new global survey said that 38% of South African primary school teachers report most children are not developmentally ready when starting school. I mean, that's a big chunk right there.
Yes, it is. Look, each year we have about 1 million children who start in grade 1. A few years ago, there was a Thrive by 5 study done, a very authoritative study and a good study, and it showed that just under 45% of children are not thriving. And you cannot have that in the year 2024. You know, we cannot grow our economy, we cannot bring peace and stability to the country if we're not looking after our children. So those are the children who are going to enter, they're going to enter grade 1 ill-prepared for the rigors, for the early literacy, for the early numeracy, and for the life skills. And some of them are going to struggle. We know that about 10 to 12% repeat grade 1, and that's not good, because that catches up with these children and they generally drop out in the higher grades, grades 9, 10, and 11. So we really have to invest earlier, because the economic return and the social return is infinitely large.
Yeah, you know, you talked about the Bella Act and the introducing that compulsory year of schooling, and you've obviously talked about the challenges that are there even in 2025. But there's something to be said about whether or not, when we legislate, we spend so much time on writing the legislation, but what speed up process then needs to happen for us to ensure that we do have the capacity, because it's a lot of issues that you've talked about. The training of teachers, providing budgets. I mean, a few organizations having raised the fact that, as it stands, ECD teachers simply don't even have the right sort of working conditions.
The conditions of adults who work with in the ECD sector, and I prefer to call them teachers as you've done.
Yeah.
We label them practitioners. And why do we use a word which doesn't express what they do? They are caring for and they are teaching our youngest children. Let me give you the picture. More than half of our ECD teachers earn below the national minimum wage. It's basically a starvation wage. And that's because the government financial input to ECD is between 1 and 2% of budget. Now, we've got about 1.6 million children in an ECD center at any one time. And we are not providing the resources for the infrastructure, for the education equipment, for the teachers' salaries that is needed. And we know that the earlier the investment in education, the greater the return. And a study done in America many, many years ago found that for every dollar invested in an early childhood quality program, the return is $17. Now, any businessman would take a 17-to-1 return, but we just don't get it. And I think part of it is that there's no political will to meet the needs of young children. And we see this not only in early childhood development, but we see it in all the other aspects of childcare.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here, and I wonder if we've got the sort of right noise that is being made by the sector, and I'm talking around whether or not the sector has a voice, particularly in speaking to government around resource allocation. Right? Is the sector organized enough?
The sector is relatively well organized. You know, they're just on 100 early childhood development nonprofits around the country. And generally, they provide a good service. The thing is, they're not getting the support that they need. Most of the support comes from the donor community. And by that, I mean corporate social investment programs, I mean foundations and trusts. And they do a marvelous job. But government support is virtually nil. And we can see it in the quality of programs that we have, which are not as they should be. A huge injection of funding. For example, our country does not have a teacher development strategy for early childhood development. This is 30 years, and next week, 31 years after democracy. It's shocking that we are not putting out and training the numbers of teachers at the quality that we need. And really, if you speak to any ECD teacher, they'll tell you about the appalling conditions that they work under. Long hours, a difficult environment, and for basically starvation wages.
Yeah, you know, I immediately think about a parent who's watching us having this conversation and listening to the various challenges might feel that they're somewhat powerless. But let's talk a little bit about what it is that parents can do to ensure that their children are better equipped for the formal schooling system.
Look, education starts in the home, and it starts with conception. I think that mother needs to be well fed, well cared for in a wholesome environment. That's where it starts, because the trauma of gender-based violence and those sorts of activities has a huge impact, not only on the mother, but also on the child. When the child is born, we need medical facilities, healthcare facilities that give the child the best care that is possible. And as we move through the various ages, there need to be early childhood development centers which offer a quality program, which are heavily subsidized by government through taxpayers' money. We will then see the economic benefit when that child enters grade 1 and thrives for 12 years, exit into the work environment, becomes a productive worker, and in that way generates further taxes for government. So I think government needs to realize that the earlier the investment, the greater the return, both social, economic, educational return. But we just don't seem to get it.
Yeah, and just a final thought perhaps on in 2025, who really needs to step up to the plate?
I think we all need to step up to the plate. Political parties, for one. Last year, just prior to the election, the Center for Early Childhood Development had 2 engagements with 11 political parties, the 11 biggest ones. I was not impressed by any of the inputs, and we're seeing it now play out itself. So parents need to stand up, political parties need to stand up, the president needs to go on record and make a definitive statement. You know, the one country in the world where education and early education thrives is Chile. And that's because the president at the time, Michelle Bachelet, she took the lead and she made it a program which got international acclaim. I just wish that our politicians and our president would do the same.
Yeah, well, we really do appreciate your time, Prof. And thank you so much for speaking to us, Eric Atmore, the founder of the NGO, the Center for Early Childhood Development.